All right, 10-minute snack. Everyone knows the rules. Let's eat. Okay, we have special guest Michelle Ward with us today. She has tested all the most popular diets in the world: vegan, Whole30, Paleo, Keto, and Carnivore. And so I would love to hear your perspective on all the most famous diets in the world, the ones you've tried, you've experimented with yourself, and like, where have you landed?
Okay, so this all kind of started. So I started my nutrition journey back in, let's see, 99, whenever I was trying to get pregnant with my daughter, who's now going to be 22 in December next month. And so all the conventional things were not working. And actually the medications the doctor had me on to help kind of, help me ovulate and all that stuff literally made me crazy. I mean, I was not easy to live with. So I was like, there's got to be a different way. So for whatever reason, I got on the internet and started reading about nutrition. I have still to this day, I wish I knew what the catalyst was. And so immediately I started, juicing wheatgrass and started buying organic milk and doing all these different things and kind of got rid of sugars out of my diet. And I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but I got pregnant a few months later and had, my first daughter. And so that kind of started me down this rabbit hole of nutrition and what we were being taught and what we were being sold and all these different things. And so I've always been kind of an outlier with my friends. They're like, you will try anything, like seriously. And so somehow, some way, when my second daughter was born, I learned about the vegan diet. I was like, well, that sounds healthy. I read the China study. I was following, I can't even remember Colin Campbell, all those people. And I was like, well, that makes total sense, that you should just not eat meat. And, of course, at that time, the American Heart Association was saying that saturated fat was bad and everything we heard, those things were bad. So I started in on the vegan diet, and that must have been probably 12 to 13 years ago, and didn't realize until now, looking back, that it destroyed my health. I developed thyroid disease, and I'm still on thyroid medication because of it. I was anemic, so it was cold all the time, and just I could never get enough iron. I could not remember anything. I think I had mental health issues. Now looking back, I was short fused and all that. And so I remember being in Colorado on a family vacation and reading something about, protein and how it was necessary, and how the vegan diet was not, actually all it was cracked up to be. And plus I was eating all the vegan junk, so it's back to basically a standard American diet, vegan style. And so I still remember telling my husband, I'm like, I think I'm going to start eating meat again. And he's like, what about all the research you've done about how bad meat is for you and all that stuff? I was like, I don't know. I think that study was constructed not like it wasn't a good study. And based on how I feel right now, I need to try something else. So I started adding meat back in, and eventually, went into the Whole30, which was so good for me just because, I mean, I knew a lot of this stuff. And at this point I was coaching other people to be vegans. And then, transitioned into the Whole30, but it made sense, no sugars and no seed oils and the dairy and all that stuff, and to kind of take all that stuff out. And so I started feeling better, but like all these other diets out there, there's still, the Whole30 approved junk food, so I wasn't really, I was pre-diabetic as well. So I was trying to, get rid of that, but that never improved. My fasting glucose was always it was around, over 100, well over 100. And so, and at that time, I didn't really make the connection between diet and diabetes and all that stuff, which you would think I would know that from my studies, but I just wasn't making that big of a connection. So after the Whole30, I tried to kind of stick to it, but again, it it begins to evolve and you like do all the oh, this is Whole30 approved, and I still wasn't feeling great. And so the paleo diet was that what, like 10 years ago, it became really popular. And that made sense, you know. And so, and it's pretty much Whole30, but then I was making all the almond flour muffins and, you know, using coconut sugar and agave nectar, thinking that that was a better choice. So basically what it boiled down to is I was addicted to sugar. Okay.
Mm.
And addicted to carbohydrates. I was way over fat. I mean, no one would ever look at me and say, she's overweight, needs to lose weight. But I know that my stomach was huge, and I was always trying to hide it. And I was working out, but I wasn't seeing results. So, and I felt like I was the healthiest person, you know, in our family, at least. And then, you know, of course, keto was the next big thing.
Can I
So I
ask you real
evolved
quick?
into to keto.
Okay, and I definitely want to hear that. I'm just very curious about the kind of the timeline. So,
Okay.
how long were you vegan, would you say?
I would say I was trying to think about that. It's all such a blur, but
Yeah.
I know that my youngest was in first grade when I was doing it, and I did it for about 3 years.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I did the Whole30 just for 30 days. I think that it was a quick, you know, transition into paleo, which I did for a couple of years as well. Keto was the longest stint I've done, and then I've landed on carnivore, which we'll talk about in a second, which I've been carnivore for about 16 months, so not quite a year and a half.
Okay. And
Um,
so, yeah, I was just curious, excuse my ignorance, because Whole30, I know it's wildly famous, but I actually
mhm.
don't know like the details. To me, you made it sound almost like it was kind of like a junky vegan diet. And when you went to Whole30, it turned into still, I would say, a heavy plant-based diet, but more of the whole like fruits and
Right.
vegetables. Is
Yes,
that
fruits
right?
and vegetables. Um, and it's been such a long time, but you didn't have dairy. Of course, you didn't have sugar, but there wasn't anything in the Whole30 about really taking out seed oils, which, and if you're buying processed foods that are Whole30 approved,
Mm-hmm.
then you're still
They
going to
probably
get the
have it.
seed oils. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I
and
need to
so,
look more into that because I'm not entirely sure, but it sounds like when I hear a lot of people go from like a junk vegan to a healthier vegan, there does tend to be like improvements. It makes
mhm,
sense. You get rid of a lot of the processed junk, more whole foods, probably still have deficiencies, which
right.
led you to paleo, which I'm assuming at that point you did add more meats. Would that be correct?
I added more meat, but it wasn't like fatty beef, fatty
Mm-hmm.
cuts, or, you know, and it definitely wasn't fat, because fat, again, was still bad for you. It wasn't until 2015 that, you know, the dietary not even the recommendations, that they came out very quietly saying, well, saturated fat is not really a nutrient of concern. And so I was like, well, you know, hold on. And it's still very, you know, very
Very
quiet about that.
contested. Yeah, very contested.
So,
Yeah, what I find so interesting about the paleo diet is because I am fascinated by like anthropology,
mhm,
archaeology. Like you, that rabbit hole goes down to the current paleo diet. Paleo diet is not really the paleo diet.
at
Like
all.
for most of modern humans, it was much closer to the carnivore diet.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, people will argue to the, you know, they'll die on that hill about, you
Mm-hmm.
know, well, no, they were foraging and eating, you know, vegetables, and mostly vegetables and some meats. I'm like, well, yeah, you can get vegetables and fruits, you know, one, in a very small period of time. During the year. As a matter of fact, I have a blackberry bush outside, and once the blackberries, you know, are grown and picked, there are no more blackberries for a year. You know, and that
Right.
so.
And
Um,
the other thing, I literally just today scrolling on social media, I see a prominent like proponent of ancestral diet speaking about and eat your lean meat. I'm like, wait, did I just hear that right? Eat your like ancestral diet, paleo diet. This would have been fatty meat, not your lean meats. But yeah, that it's still like even in the groups that are the furthest along the line, I feel like in understanding an ancestral diet, they're still missing the boat a lot of times.
right. And to that point, I would eat a lot of lean meat. I would eat a lot of chicken or white fish and things like that, but I still didn't feel great, and
That's me. I did the same thing.
yeah, and I was like, well, it's supposed to be healthy. But one of the things that I did learn, and when I started the carnivore diet, which I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, I did say to my husband and to my friends, because they're like, you're never going to eat another vegetable. I'm like, I'm never saying never again, because I said I would never eat meat again as a vegan, and
Right.
I'd never do this and never do that. But what I recognize now is I was not paying attention to my body signals and what my body was telling me, which I would always tell my clients that, like, you know, it's the bioindividuality, and you may respond differently to this thing than I do, but just pay attention to what your body's telling you. And I'm like, golly, but whenever you're dug in on something and really and do all the research, I mean, you can find anything to support your theory or whatever. So that is one thing that I swore I would never, like, I now a year ago I'm like, I'm not digging in on this. It's not going to be a dogma. It's not going to be a religion. It's just going to
Mm-hmm.
be something I'm trying. If it stops working, then I'll figure it out.
But to your, I guess I'll say credit, but it's like not your fault. What I have seen so often is people like if we're under some kind of stress, we adapt and have a new normal. And just as a quick example, like when I, in my practice treating sleep apnea patients who basically have had sleep apnea for a decade, not had a good night's sleep in a decade,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't know how tired they were until after they got treated. And they were like, oh my goodness, this is
Yeah.
what a night's sleep feels like. This is the energy I'm supposed to have. So what I'm trying to say is I think a lot of people feel bad on a day-to-day basis and they don't
Right.
even realize what they could feel like. So I do think that is part of it. So it's not that maybe
Exactly.
you weren't listening to your signals as much as like this, maybe this is normal.
Right. Exactly. But, again, like on the vegan diet and even the paleo and keto diet, I could not lose my belly fat. And I knew that was just so um, dangerous for heart disease and things like that. And my numbers were always pre-diabetic. You're still
Right.
pre-diabetic.
You
I'm like,
had the red
how?
flags waving and
Yeah.
kind of
And
ignored the
yes.
red flags a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of them, and still anemic. And I'm like, I would take liver supplements because I'm like, well, I'm not going to, eat. And then
Sure.
there was that whole idea of why would you eat a liver of an animal? That's where we filter all of our, bad stuff through. I'm like, and now, now we know the truth.
Yeah.
So,
So just to rewind real quick so we can connect
yeah.
the story. We were at Paleo, and then was there an impetus that led to keto, or were you like, that's kind of the Paleo was probably keto, so what kind of led you there? And then I want to go to the final, impetus into carnivore.
I think it was well, so my hair was super brittle, my teeth were brittle, my skin, I looked so dry. And so I know that fat, the right types of fat can help improve those things. And so I'm like, well, I'm just gonna go to a higher fat,
Mm-hmm.
diet. So that's kind of the paleo and keto spaces are a lot alike.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think in that. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to try this keto thing, which I can eat more fat, which is to me would give me more, gave me more energy now looking back. But I still didn't increase my protein much. So I was still making the like simple meals, muffins and eating the crackers, the almond flour crackers. But I always felt so bloated and I mean TMI, but I was always constipated, always. And so I was always doing cleanses and things like that or fasting. Um, like basically if I was just drinking bone broth, I felt the best in my life. And I remember saying that
Mm-hmm.
uh, um, to my husband, and my daughter was sitting there. It's like, I think I'd just feel better if I just didn't ever eat. And he's like,
Didn't
don't say that in front of your daughter, kind of thing.
right.
But so and then but I would eat the keto cookies, the keto ice cream, the keto this, the keto that. I'm like, this is still processed food. It's still not good for you,
Right.
And
That's what I
so
see, in the keto diets. That's trying to do a keto diet without doing a lot of fatty meat is a lot of times I would say a bad diet because you got to get those fats from basically plants then, and a lot of those are the seed oils. Like that's just and the high quality fats on keto, yeah, maybe some avocado, but like how many avocado are you going to eat? Right?
I
So
know.
yeah, I mean, I just want to point that out because I think there are a lot of keto people, but really it's like keto carnivore became a thing because it's like, if you want to do keto successfully, you really need to include a lot of meat.
Right, exactly. And I don't remember what the impetus was for me to jump from keto to carnivore. I mean, like everybody, 2020 and 2021 were super stressful. I had a senior in high school, 2020. She's graduating in 2020, so she had a really crappy, year. Of
Hmm.
course, mom takes that on. I had a freshman in college who had to come home from college that year. And then the next year or the fall of 2020 was awful for both my girls. And so I'm managing their emotions, trying to manage mine. And then my dad died. Um,
One
and
thing after another.
pretty, like, it was pretty sudden. He'd had cancer and it just came back with a vengeance. And so he passed away. And so it was like one thing after the other. And I just wasn't feeling great. I wasn't sleeping well. Again, I just had all this body fat. I was working out, but no results. And so I'm sure I was doing some kind of research on YouTube and something popped up about carnivore. And I was like,
Interesting.
well, let's try that. And so I didn't even tell anybody. I didn't tell my husband. I didn't tell my kids because they're going to be like, oh my God, what is mom doing again? I did it I started in August of last year after we dropped my youngest off at school. The other one was there at school, and it was almost immediate. Like I was like, I felt so great, and I had some of the side effects, not knowing I needed to take electrolytes and things like that. But I went and got my blood work done. No longer anemic, no longer pre-diabetic. My Hashimoto's is in remission. I'm still taking thyroid medicine. As a matter of fact, I went to my doctor today, but everything improved. Everything did. And of course, my husband's like, "Are you going to get heart disease?" And so, trying to educate everybody and just trying to stay not quiet about it, but just like I'll
Cautious.
answer if I'm asked. You know how
Right.
people are.
Hmm.
And so, but I haven't, once I got through over the hump um, of the carbohydrate addiction and the sugar addiction, I have not, I can be around that stuff. I can be around corn chips, which is, like at the Mexican food restaurant, and it doesn't bother me anymore. I can be around cake, cookies, whatever. And now with the holidays, it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, I've already done it once. I think I can do it again.
Hmm.
But I think the hardest thing about carnivore is how everybody else responds to it. And why aren't you drinking? Why aren't you eating this? Aren't you going to have some of my pecan pie or whatever,
Yep. Hmm.
without appearing judgmental or, whatever.
Yep. How
But
long do
it's
you
been
think?
the
Oh,
greatest
I'm sorry.
thing.
Yeah, I
I'm
was just
sorry.
kind of curious. How long roughly do you think it took you to get over the hump, the sugar addiction, carb addiction kind of hump?
So the thing about me and any of my friends or family would tell you, once I make a decision about something and I tell people I'm doing it, then I will, where there's a
Follow
will,
through.
there's a way.
Yeah.
So I think it probably lasted longer than, I would like to admit, but I would say I'm an abstainer, not a moderator. And
Hmm.
so I think it took about 3 weeks to where I wasn't like foraging for food or like thinking about foraging for food in my pantry. And
Right.
thankfully, I mean, not thankfully, but thankfully, my children are away at school. So I don't have all that processed stuff. And my husband will just eat what I make him, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So he doesn't need all that junk.
Yeah, two
So,
things there that I think are really important. One is I think one of the biggest benefits with the carnivore diet is the change in the relationship to food. And just like you said,
mhm,
you walk by things at the grocery store, and for example, I'll be walking by with my girlfriend and she's like, "Oh, look at these." And I'm like, there's no appeal to me to like
mhm,
to need or want anything. And like,
yes,
well, I'll joke around with her, like, do you feel like you like need it? And she's like, "Yeah, I need that."
mhm,
um and so I think the healing of the relationship with food, like not needing to eat sugar, like you can choose to, and a lot of times I find that after a while people can choose to have some and not need more and more and more. uh and then the second thing that you mentioned that I just want to bring up is like the environment that you're in. Like you
mhm,
said, the benefit, but not a benefit. Your kids aren't around, so you can kind of have your own food around.
right,
When I started carnivore, and I mean, to this day, I still live by myself, but I didn't have much of a social life, just a big worker bee.
Yeah.
And so like I have all my own food. I buy my own food, cook my own food. I literally went over 2 years with not one plant food. And it wasn't like, to most people, that's just hugely unrealistic just because of life. Like
Right.
just ordering something, it's gonna have something on it. But I think the environment is a very important thing for like early success, because it's a easy way to derail.
Right. Well, you've got to set yourself up for success, and you've got to, create that environment for yourself. Or just like, I have a client right now who all she eats is processed foods, and I asked her to send me over, her food log, and she's eating about 700 calories a day, and it's
Mm.
mango fruit bars and ice cream, and I was like, okay, first we got to get some protein into that body. And I said, but you're going to have to start making food for yourself and just say, this is my food, don't eat it, and I'm trying to get healthy, kind of thing. And you have to take a stand and set boundaries with your friends, your family members, and just not deviate. And it does take some willpower, and we know that we run out of willpower after a certain period of time. But by the time we run out of willpower, hopefully we're feeling good enough to where we don't want to go back to how we were feeling before.
I totally agree with you there. Now I know we've gone over, just this has been so good, so I'm fine with it. Hopefully all the listeners and watchers are fine with it too. I'd like to ask one last question, and that's you're kind of the all or nothing personality like myself,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also said you're not going to say this is it for life. So I'm just curious about your perspective on diet moving forward. Is it a day-to-day thing, or are you like, I'm just going to be carnivore forever? Like, where's your current stance is what I'm
Um,
curious about.
well, my current stance is that I'm never changing what I'm doing because I feel
Okay.
so great. Um, and but I also, my current stance is I've got to pay attention to what my body's saying, pay attention to what my blood work is saying, pay attention to all these other different things, my strength in the gym. If I'm starting to feel weak, or my sleep, my stress levels, and all that stuff, because that's going to dictate. I've learned enough over the last 20 years of studying this stuff. I've learned enough to know that we don't know everything, and to be dogmatic about something and saying you're never ever going to do this thing again is pretty short. It's pretty short sighted, even though it's a long term decision. You're making a
Mhm.
long term decision. So I would just say it all depends on how I feel, how I'm progressing, and if I'm moving forward in life with my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, and all that stuff. So
I think sounds great. Well, Michelle, I want to say thank you for all your time today and bestowing all this experience and knowledge. Like myself and you, we've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. Hopefully,
yeah.
some people listening and watching, they can skip some of those lessons. Although I
Mm-hmm.
do think the people that have kind of this willingness to experiment, go outside the dogma and the status quo, are the ones that actually do find health and keep it. So I do think there is a real benefit for that kind of person that's willing to do that. Probably the kind of person that is watching this would fit into
Right.
that category.
Well, the School of Hard Knocks is not a bad school to go to, I will say. I mean, it might stink while you're going through it, but looking back, it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. So where can people find you? I know you're a wealth of knowledge, so I'm sure people want to, find you where they can.
So I'm on Instagram I actually just changed my Instagram handle, and it's but first meat. So BUT first, FIRST meat. I have a website, the Michelle Ward, but I'm actually working on it right now because it was from previous, coaching experiences, and there's lots of vegetables, pictures of vegetables on that. So it doesn't really,
It's getting a
uh,
makeover.
yeah. So I'm working on that. So and I do coach clients. I do take on clients, so you just DM me through But First Meet.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thanks, Kevin. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Snack time's over. Did you enjoy the snack? If so, drop me a comment. Let me know if we should dive deeper and do a full meal on this topic. Also, P.S. If you liked the snacks, you're going to love our bites. A daily email bite, a golden nugget, better than a pasture-raised egg yolk. All right, maybe not that good, but it is a daily bite to optimize your health and nutrition with a meat-based diet. Access right now is totally free. Link below. See you in the bites.